Hi, everybody. My name is Rose Eshman, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 12th, 2001. My home group is Singleness of Purpose, and it meets in Spring Hill, Florida. It's a big book study, which is something I love, which is the big book. I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to come here today and share my experience, strength, and hope with you. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to do this in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't always feel that way. I want to thank Mike Singleton for asking me, and Beth for being a lovely host, and she brought me a really great sandwich at the airport, so thank you very much. And that's probably all I have to say because I'm too tired to answer your questions. Just kidding. But I'm really thrilled to be here, but I always get super nervous before I speak. I don't know why it is, maybe because I'm just going to cut myself wide open and allow you to see the vulnerability, because I think it's really important that you hear my heart. I didn't want any part of this program. The last thing in the world I wanted was to be in a room full of kooks. I never imagined that somebody like me, an alcoholic of my type, could ever be sober. The end of my drinking was so painful that I just really wanted to die. That was the only answer. It was the only way out that I could see. So the fact that I'm here and I'm alive and I'm sober is just credit to AA and to the fellowship. I think quite often we forget about the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is the program that keeps me here, but the fellowship got me to stay. All the women who surrounded me and wouldn't let me leave. All the women in this program who taught me how to love myself when I couldn't even look myself in the eye. I always want to thank the people who tape speakers, too, because it was a time when I wouldn't pick up a phone to call anybody. It wasn't that I couldn't, it was that I wouldn't. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, I would listen to somebody share their experience, strength, and hope, and they saved me from picking up that drink. And I will be forever grateful for that. So now I'm going to qualify and tell you who I am, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I am originally from New Jersey. Thank you for letting me come back to the Northeast. I love your weather. Florida's very hot. It's 11 months and like 28 days a year. So I'm very grateful for that. I come from a good family. I come from a mother and father that stayed together my whole life. My mother was a Scottish immigrant. My father was Irish and German. I'm Catholic, so this might come as a surprise, Irish Catholics and Alcoholics Anonymous. But I had a good family life. My parents did their job. I don't blame anyone for my alcoholism. I knew right from wrong. I went to 12 years of Catholic school. I had 2 older brothers. I had a little sister. I had a swimming pool in the backyard. But there was something always wrong with me. I was never quite right. My skin never fit from the time I was a very little girl. I always describe it as I was just blue. I was just sad all the time. And I don't know why. I was incredibly shy. I'm still very much socially awkward. I'm a nervous wreck right now. I always feel like the water pistol that shoots jelly. Like I just am not quite right. And I never know what to say after I'm fine, thank you, how are you? So this is really hard for me, so I'm going to try to make it as bearable for you as possible. But like I said, I come from a good family. I went to 12 years of Catholic school, incredibly shy. I was an overweight, red-headed kid. I'm 56 years old. Back then, red hair was not vogue. It was not vogue. Everybody didn't have red hair. There was 2 people in, the whole world that had red hair. One of them was really skinny, and the other one was me. I was the fat redhead, with the big gap in her teeth that you could drive a Mack truck through, and freckles. And for the older people, remember Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine? Well, I was his sister, And I was not the cheerleader. I was not popular, but I had friends. I had a good life. But I had 2 older brothers that were incredibly athletic and smart and handsome and popular, and I always kind of just dwelled in the background. I never took the forefront. When I was 9 years old, my parents had another child, my little sister, and I became very much her mother. My mother worked, and every day after school I would go home and I would take care of this little girl, and I always felt safe at home. But when my little sister came along, my whole life changed. I became like this little old soul. And I was no longer the baby of the family. And I was no longer the only girl. And once again, I just disappeared into the sidelines. I remember tasting alcohol as a child. When you come from an Irish Catholic family, we drink a lot. You know, you drink if somebody gets married, you drink if somebody dies, you drink because you drink. And I remember tasting alcohol, and I never liked the taste of it. And to this day, I still do not like the taste of alcohol. I drink for effect only. I had my very first drink that I can remember of significance when I was 14 years old. I was a freshman in high school, and I was determined to fit in. So I did what all the other cool, freshmen do in high school. I started to smoke. And there was a high school dance coming up, and I wanted beer, because that's what the cool kids did, right? They drank beer. So I begged my older brother to please buy me a six-pack of beer. And my brother said, I don't think that's a good idea, Rose. And I said, but you do it. And I bugged him as only a little sister can bug an older brother until he gave in, and he bought me that six-pack of beer. And my life changed forever. I can still remember exactly how that beer felt. It was a Rheingold Tall Boy. And I can still feel it going down into my stomach. And my life changed because it wasn't that the alcohol told me that I was beautiful and smart and funny and popular. It was that I didn't care that I wasn't. It was my coping skill. See, I didn't have any coping skills. And I knew from that moment on I'd found the solution to the awkwardness that was me. I'd found the solution to all the uncomfortability. I have never drank socially, ever. I was never that girl that could have a drink and like a sandwich, which is like incomprehensible to me that people actually drink and eat. Because you did one or the other, right? You don't do them together. That's just unconscionable to me. So I drank alcoholically right from the start. I knew I drank differently than my friends. I knew it was more important to me. I knew that's all I thought about. I knew I obsessed over it. I knew I didn't want to share with you. By the time I was 15, I had my first bout of alcohol poisoning. I went out in the woods with my friends, because that's what you do. You go out in the woods and drink. And I drank a whole bottle of vodka straight down. I passed out. My heart stopped. I was rushed to the hospital. My stomach was pumped. My heart was started. And I was humiliated. But it didn't occur to me that I should stop drinking. What occurred to me is maybe I should take it a little slower. Maybe I should mix that with something. Maybe I should pace myself just a little bit better. See, giving it up was not an option. By the time I was 16, I was hanging out in bars. I always looked older than I was, which is great when you're young, not so good when you're old. And I would go into the bars. And back then, the paper licenses, right? I was Gina Sabatino for many, many years. And I drank every day after school. Most kids go home, do homework, stuff like that. Not me, I'm at the bar. By the time I was 17 years old, my father sat me down and he said, Rose, you have all the earmarks of being an alcoholic. My father was a bartender. And if my father knew anything, he knew that he was looking at his daughter, and his daughter had a problem. And as he sat looking over the top of his glasses at the dining room table with him on one end and me at the other, I knew my dad was right. I knew it was too important to me. But I also knew I had no intention of giving it up. It didn't bother me to be branded as an alcoholic because I believed everything was manageable. I believed at 17 I knew everything. I had my own car and a part-time job. I had the world. And I just figured I was going to have to be a little bit smarter. I was going to have to hide it a little bit better. I was going to have to sneak in the house a little bit quieter. By the time I graduated high school, my parents told me I was supposed to go to college. I didn't know that. See, what I know now as a sober woman is my alcoholism took away from me any motivation to be anything more than I was at that moment. That's when I started to settle for good enough is good enough. So to appease my parents, I enrolled in a community college, and I went for 3 whole months. And I dropped out because I convinced them and myself that I am a worker, and I am a worker. I was 9 years old. I had 2 paper routes. I babysat as soon as somebody would allow me to. And the thing is, I didn't do it because I think I'm such a go-getter. I love money. I love what money can buy for me. I love that I can buy alcohol and party favors with money. I need money. So I went and I got a full-time job. I started working in a grocery store. I had never had a serious relationship with a man ever. My only relationship was with alcohol. I met when I was 20 years old, I'd started working for a bank, and I had met the older brother of a friend of mine, and I fell instantly in love with him. It was love at first sight, and it wasn't that he was so handsome and wonderful and charming. It was that he drank like I did. See, I have to be with somebody who drinks like me. Because if I'm not with somebody who drinks like me, I look abnormal. Right? And I couldn't look abnormal. I was already selling myself on the lie of who I wanted you to believe that I was, and I was starting to believe I was that person too. I was with this man for the next 13 years. 2 years into our relationship, my parents and his parents got together and said, we have to separate these two. They will kill each other. That's how toxic this relationship was, and they were right. But what I heard is, we are so in love and they are denying our love. We are Romeo and Juliet, and we must be together no matter what the cost. And I stayed with this man. I lived with my parents till I was 25 years old, and they threw me out on the street because they decided to retire to Florida. So with nowhere else to go, I moved in with this man. Now I'm an everyday drinker, full-blown alcoholic at 17. I'm now 25. I have a good job. I work for a Fortune 500 company. I'm making a lot of money, and I move in with this man because I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. As soon as I move in with him, he stops working. Well, of course he does. And I start lying more and more about this relationship to my parents. Now I'm an everyday drinker anyway. I'm a blackout drinker. I can't put a drink up to my lips without blacking out. But the amount of alcohol I started to consume once I didn't have to sneak in the house anymore, once I didn't have to drive home anymore, was ridiculous. I was drinking about 1.75 liters of whiskey every night. And every morning I woke up in a puddle of my own urine, and I threw up. Every single time I drank, I threw up, and I continued to do it. Because it's inconceivable to me to live without alcohol. Our relationship continued to get worse. He was a worse alcoholic than me, in my opinion. I really felt that he was the problem. You see, because I'm out working, and he's not working, so his alcoholism was way worse. And if he would just clean up his act, if he would get sober, life would be great. But he was a sick alcoholic. He used to bleed from the varices in his esophagus. And he would be rushed to the hospital time and time again, and he would be told, if you drink again, you will die. And he would drink again, and he wouldn't die. And he would go in and out of rehab, and I would go in and out of rehab visiting him. And one time he came out of rehab, and he said he wanted to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Whoa. I thought, wow, you really do need that. And so I did what every good girlfriend would do. I went to the meeting to support him. I walked into a hospital. It was a speaker meeting, and I immediately was uncomfortable. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I knew I was in the wrong place. I sat down, and a woman got up to a podium much like this, and she introduced herself. She said, my name is Debbie B., and I am an alcoholic. And she proceeded to tell her story. And what I couldn't understand was how the woman at the podium pulled every feeling out of my stomach that I had ever felt. How could she put into words what I have felt my entire life? I didn't know that that was my first identification with another alcoholic. She came up to me after the meeting because I sat there sobbing. And she did what we're supposed to do. She put her hand out there. She put the hand of AA out there and said, you don't have to live like this anymore. There's a better way. And she tried to help me. She told me things like, don't drink and go to meetings. And what I heard was go to meetings and I would show up drunk. And she would force me to read the promises over and over and over and over. She'd give me jobs, buying cookies, making coffee, and I wouldn't stop drinking. She convinced me to go to rehab, and I went. I went to a 30-day rehab in New Jersey. It was like one of those celebrity rehabs. I got the chip at the end that said, you're wonderful and you'll never drink again. Of course, he went to rehab at the same time because we are Romeo and Juliet. So he gets out of rehab, I get out of rehab, I go back to AA, I don't do one thing that you tell me to do, and within 2 months I'm drinking again. But see, I don't tell my family. So for the next 10 years, I let my family think that I'm sober. He's still drinking, but I'm sober. And it's not so hard when your family lives out of town, when you're just making phone calls. You know, I don't call them at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, when I order like the first 2 seasons of Hee Haw because I'm drunk and I'm dialing for stupid stuff, and I just don't call them. But I would go down there to visit, and it would be a tough visit because like 12 hours into the visit, I'm white knuckling it, and I would be squirreled away in my parents' guest bedroom drinking in the middle of the night. But they think I'm sober. So I'm with this man, and my relationship is getting progressively worse. He starts to become very psychologically abusive. He starts to be very verbally abusive. He used to do things like he would set traps and wires on the stairway so I would fall down the stairs. He started to become sexually abusive. He would rape me. He would force me to masturbate in front of him, horrible things. And I was so ashamed of who I was and so ashamed of this relationship that I wouldn't tell anybody. And then the abuse became physical. And the police were often called to my home. And they would publish it in the paper. And my brothers would tell my parents. And my parents wouldn't ask me because they were waiting for their daughter to tell them. They were waiting for their daughter to ask for help. One time my dad and mom came up from a visit from Florida, and I had a big black eye, and my dad looked at me and he said, "What happened there?" And I said, I was bent over picking something up, and Mark opened the door, and the handle hit me in the eye, and my dad looked at me and he said, "Baby, you got one time to tell me that story." And I'm filled with shame. And I'm so sick in my alcoholism that I can't find my way out. And I know I have to get away from this man, but I believe what he says to me. He says to me, "If you leave me, I will kill you. If you leave me, I will hurt your family." And I buy the lie. I buy the lie because I'm so sick I can't see past it. Eventually, I have the strength. I say, I'm going to do this. I'm the one making the money. I'm doing everything. I'm leaving this guy. I can't take it anymore. For the last 6 months, I was spending every weekend in a hotel. I've got to get away from him. And he fell down a flight of stairs and he broke his neck. And he became partially paralyzed. He had limited use of all 4 limbs, and now I can't leave him. What kind of a person would leave somebody when they're at their worst? Now I'm really stuck. And for the next year and a half, he continued to drink. And the reason he continued to drink is because I continued to buy it for him. I bought it for him because it was easier. I used to stop on the way home from work, and I would get sleeping pills, and I would crush them up, and I would put them in his drink, just so maybe he would pass out, and I would get 5 minutes of peace. I didn't realize I could have killed him. Eventually, he was rushed to the hospital again with another GI bleed, and my mother just happened to be visiting from Florida. And we went to the hospital to see him, and my mother took one look at me, and she knew I was dying. She didn't know I was drinking, but she knew I was dying. And she went in to see this man that I'd been with for the last 13 years, and she came out of his hospital room, and she said, "That's it." I said, "What's it?" She said, "It's over." I said, "What's over?" She goes, "You guys, you're done." And she broke up with the man that I was unable to break up with for the last 13 years. And I thought to myself, what took you so long? And I thought my life was supposed to get magically better, right? And it didn't, because I'm still drinking. And I know about you. I know about AA, but I don't want you. I just want to feel better. I can't stop drinking. I would convince myself on the way home from work as I'm white-knuckling it. See, I'm such a sick alcoholic in the morning, I can't drink till late at night because it takes me that long to get well. And I would white-knuckle it on the way home from work saying, just don't stop at the liquor store. And I'd stop and I'd say, just don't go in. And I'd go in and then I'd say, just don't buy a bottle. And I would buy 3. I couldn't stop. I would pour a big drink, and I drank out of red Solo cups. Yeah, Toby Keith, me first. Red Solo cups. And it was almost all the way full with the whiskey. And I would put a little dash of soda on the top. I'd put a straw in it. I'd suck the whole thing all the way down. Sometimes I'd throw it right back up and drink it right back down again. That's the kind of alcoholic I am. And I knew it was my problem, but I can't imagine not drinking. So I decide what I need to do is get social. I need to have some social life. I have no social life. So that's my answer. So I start doing things like going to the movies. But I have to go to the movies at like 10 in the morning because I have to start drinking at 4 in the afternoon because alcohol dictates my whole life, right? So I start hanging out with some friends at work that are a little younger than me, and they're doing things like party favors and things I hadn't done in years, and I find myself back in a world that I hadn't been in and hiding my alcoholism from them and doing that alone at night. I'm a hermit alcoholic. I drink alone. And they convinced me one night to go out to a bar. I don't go to bars. I'm not a bar drinker. And I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. Oh, you never go out. You never do anything, Rose. Please come with us. I don't like bars for a couple of reasons. By this point, I suffer from every phobia you can imagine. Agoraphobia, claustrophobia, every phobia. So being in a crowded bar is not appealing to me. The size of the drinks is very unappealing to me. have to order like 17 at a time to drink the way I need to drink, because that's how I need to drink. It's not how I want to drink, it's how I need to drink. So they convinced me to go, and what I didn't know, because I'm 35 years old at this time, was it was the night before Thanksgiving, and that's a huge night out in the bars. All the kids are home from college, and they all go out. Whoa, didn't know that. So, of course, I do what every good alcoholic does. I have a few drinks before I go out, because you have to do that. And I go to the bar, and I walk in, and I'm wildly uncomfortable. And so I'm like, oh, my God, please let me go. So I stay for a couple hours. I say, this has been great. Thank you so much. Good time. And I say, I got to go. Because in my head, I know I've got to go home. I've got to get drunk. I've got to pass out, because I don't sleep. I pass out wherever I am. Couch, the floor, the bathtub, wherever I am, I pass out. And I've got to go home, get drunk, pass out, wake up, get sick, and make myself look presentable to be at my brother's house for Thanksgiving dinner. Because you see, I'm not drinking. It's a lot of work. A lot of work. So I say goodnight, and the thought never occurs to me, not for 1 second, that I shouldn't drive. I'm a professional alcoholic. I've been doing this for many years. I haven't even had that much to drink. I go into my car, I turn the ignition, I start to drive home. I lived exactly 17.3 miles from where the bar was located to my apartment. I was literally around the corner from my apartment, and I'm a smoker, and I dropped my cigarette. I bent over to pick up my cigarette, and I hit something. And I absolutely convinced myself at that moment that I hit a deer. I lived in a very rural part of northwest New Jersey, no street lights, no sidewalks, dark, rainy nights, deer everywhere, brown bear, had to have been a deer. And I don't stop. I don't stop because the cop shop, the police station, is 100 yards down on the left-hand side. You see, this is how Rose's life works. I hit something almost right in front of the police station. I turn the corner, park my car, go inside. Talking to a friend of mine, and I say, I hit a deer a couple roads up, and my windshield shattered. It imploded. And it's raining, and what am I going to do? He said, Rose, don't worry, I have a tarp. I'll come over and I'll cover your windshield for you. So sure enough, 10 minutes later, I see his truck pull into the parking lot. I go out. We go to cover the front of my car with the tarp. And on the upper right-hand corner is a tuft of hair and a chunk of a human forehead. And my life stopped forever. And I said, please take me home. And I'd love to tell you that I did that to protect him, because that's what I told myself for a long time. I don't want to drag him into this. But I did it because I panicked, and I didn't know what else to do. And I went home and I do what I know how to do, which is drink. I didn't hide my car. I knew the cops would find me. And I sat and I drank. 2.5 hours later, there was a knock on my door. It was the Mount Olive Police Department, Miss Eshman. It appears as though your vehicle's been involved in an accident. And they took me in for questioning. After 5.5 hours, he told me I'd struck and killed a 45-year-old man that was walking in the road. And I didn't know that because I didn't stop. They were so nice to me at the police department. They didn't want to take me to the county jail. They begged me to find somebody to come and bail me out from the police station. A good friend of mine showed up, paid the bail, and I got out, and I knew there was only one thing to do, that I would have to kill myself. See, because there's no getting over this. There's no coming back from this. See, I was that alcoholic that convinced myself I never hurt anybody. I only hurt myself. And now I've done this. I can't get through this, past this, over this. And I went on a mission to kill myself. Now the jig's up. Everybody knows. My parents know. My mother calls me and begs me to do two things. She said, Bruce, please get some help. Please check yourself in somewhere. And please get an attorney. And I did both those things. I checked myself into a mental health facility. After 11 days, they told me, you need to leave here, but you're not well enough to go home. And they placed me in a crisis center for adults. I got an attorney. And after they placed me in this crisis center for adults, I did what I thought made sense, and I had an affair with my counselor. Because anything that will distract me from me is what I need. I don't want to look at me. I don't want to know what's going on in my life. I don't want to deal with this. I have to distract from this. And this man, I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know if he thought he could charge in on his white horse and save me. There was nothing attractive about me. I still to this day am mind blown that he thought he could fix me. But he tried. I tried going back to AA, and I thought you were still a bunch of kooks, and I knew that wasn't going to work. I tried to go back to work after a period of time, and I realized I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do simple things. I couldn't remember how to take a shower or brush my teeth. I just wanted to die. And I kept finding myself over and over in psych wards, in straitjackets, drinking charcoal with cops at the door. It just wasn't working. So this man said to me, he finally caught on that I was drinking still. And he said to me, if you drink one more time, you'll have to leave. You don't tell an alcoholic like me not to drink. He goes to work, I go to the liquor store. That's just the way it is. And so he said to me, you're going to have to leave. You see, because I had decided after I consulted an attorney to take my case to trial. And I didn't take my case to trial because I thought I was innocent. Clearly, I'm not innocent. I know I did this. But I honestly believed at that time, on some level, that if I could walk into a courtroom and I could look at this man's family and say that I was sorry and that I'm not a monster, it would somehow relieve some of the blackness in my soul. But it took 2.5 years to get there. So he realizes I'm drinking, says I can't live with him anymore. I have nowhere to go. He puts me on a plane to Florida. Now, technically, if you're on bail in one state, you shouldn't be going to another one. But I did because I had nowhere else to go. I appear on the doorstep of my parents. My attorney knows exactly where I am. And I just decide to myself, it's unfortunate, but I'm going to have to kill myself here in their spare bedroom. But my parents made that virtually impossible for me. They used to do things for me like, I live 15 minutes from the beach. They would take me to the beach to watch the sunset. They were trying to give me 5 minutes of peace, something they didn't know what to do for me. They were trying to love me, and I couldn't see it. All I wanted to do was die. Around the same time, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, had found recovery in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he and my sister and their 2 small children had come to my parents' house for dinner. And after dinner, my brother-in-law stood up and he looked at me and said, Rose, I'm going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. Would you like to come? And I've never hated anyone in my life as much as I hated him at that moment. And my father once again looked over the top of his glasses at me and said, baby, I don't think you have a choice. And I went to my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Florida. And I couldn't look at anybody in the eyes. All I could get out was, my name is Rose and I'm an alcoholic. And I saw your shoes. Because I was too ashamed of who I was. And every single night, that bum would show up and drag me to another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to get a glimmer of hope. I started to think maybe I could get through this. So my best thinking was to get back involved with the man in New Jersey who threw me out. And I started traveling back and forth to New Jersey to see him. On one of these trips, my sister called me and told me to please get back right away. My father was very sick. And I rushed home, and within a week, my father died. The beautiful part of that was that I got to make an amends to my father. And the kind of amends I need to make, the alcoholic of my type, has to say things like, I'm sorry I stole your ability to trust. I'm sorry I stole your peace of mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have taken money out of his wallet too. But those were the things that I did. My mother once told me I was the only child that every time I left the house, she wondered if she'd ever see me again. I never realized what that must feel like for a person to live like that. But I got to make my amends to my father. He died, and what a good daughter would have done, knowing that they've got an upcoming trial, knowing that their mother just lost her husband of 45 years, would have stayed there and picked up the pieces with their mom. But that's not what I did. What I did was board a plane and go back to New Jersey because I knew I only had a few months left before I went to trial, and I wanted to spend it with the man that I love. I didn't think about my mother, and I left her there. I was no sooner in New Jersey, feet on the ground, and I was drinking again. And I was pregnant. And I knew I was pregnant. And I couldn't stop drinking. And I told him I was pregnant, and he wasn't happy about that. Imagine that. Not happy about it. I start drinking so bad, he tells me again, if you drink again, you have to leave. He goes to work, I go to the liquor store. This is not what you say to me. Sure enough, the next day, he took me to Newark Airport, put me on a plane, paid $750 one way. You know somebody wants rid of you when they're willing to part with that much cash just to get rid of you. My sister and my AA sponsor picked me up in Tampa, and when they got there, I was sitting in the bar with 2 7 and 7s in front of me, and my sister said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm drunk, how are you?" And she said, "A little better than you." And I said, "And I'm pregnant," and it's the only time I ever uttered those words. Every night from that night on, I drove illegally from my mother's house to an AA meeting, and every night I stopped at the liquor store and bought a bottle. And every night I looked at the clock on the wall and waited for the time to tick away so I could get out of this mess and get home and drink. And I did that for months. Eventually, I boarded a plane in January of 2001 to New Jersey to stand trial. My trial lasted 3.5 weeks. During the course of that trial, I miscarried, which is a blessing because I did nothing but harm this child, nothing. So now I'm facing trial for killing a man, and I've just miscarried a child because I didn't know how to take care of it. And I am ready to just end it all, but my mother knows that, and she stays very close to me. After 3.5 weeks, I was found guilty of 3 charges. I was found guilty of death by auto, leaving a scene of an accident, and possession of less than 50 milligrams of CDS. I was immediately handcuffed and shackled and taken to the county jail. What I found out is they could bail me out pending my sentencing, and I immediately started to bombard my mother with phone calls to beg her to demand that she come to the county jail and get me out. If this was one of your sons, you'd get him out of jail, I told her. And eventually she showed up at the county jail. And I'll never forget standing behind the two-way glass, and my mother was 4'11" and spoke with a Scottish brogue. And she looked at me and she said, "Rosellen, I love you, but I'm going to save your life. I'm not getting you out of jail." And she let me stay there. And I never hated her as much in my life as when she walked away from me. What I didn't know was that as she walked away, she cried the whole way to the car. See, because I can't see her pain, I only see my own. I'm so self-centered. I spent 4.5 months in the county jail. Eventually, I was sentenced to 12 years and 30 days in the only female facility in the state of New Jersey. 8 days later, I was handcuffed and I was taken to the Edna Man Correctional Facility for Women. For the first half of my sentence, I had to spend it in the maximum security part of the prison because in New Jersey, my crime is a violent crime. My car was my weapon. And I had to spend it in the maximum security. There is no AA. There was no AA. I don't know if that's changed. When I was there was Al-Anon. And no offense to anyone in Al-Anon, but I did not need Al-Anon. And the thought has not occurred to me yet that I will stop drinking. You see, because in 12 years and 30 days, I'll drink again. I'll know what it'll taste like. I can feel the burn. I know where I'll hide it. And I'm angry. But I didn't use in prison, and I'll tell you why. It's not that it's not available. For anybody who's done time in prison, it's there. What are you willing to do for it? How much money are you willing to pay? How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice? And because I'm such a glutton, because I'm such a pig, you couldn't give me enough. So I said nothing. I'm all or nothing. See, I could never have one beer. I don't want any. And I stayed clean. For the first 3 years, as I said, I was in the maximum security part of the prison, and then I became reclassified into the minimum security part of the prison. And there was an opportunity to get involved in a program called Puppies Behind Bars. It's a program where inmates raise dogs for law enforcement. I hadn't seen a tree, I hadn't seen anything, grass, anything for 3 years. And now I'm in another part of the prison, and I can see cars on a highway, there's grass, there's flowers, and this program with dogs. And I thought, this time's starting to do me. I'm going to get involved in this. And I entered the program, and I realized that I loved dogs. I always had a dog growing up, but I didn't know how much I loved dogs. After about 4 months in the program, they gave me my own dog to raise. It was a 8-week-old black Labrador retriever named Sandy. And they put this dog in my arms. And something changed. She was with me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She was in my cell with me. And I realized one night sitting here, it was one of many, spiritual awakenings that I've had. I realized as this dog looked at me, She didn't care what I did. She didn't care what I looked like. She didn't care how I smelled. She just loved me. And I got another little bit of hope. And I realized one by one she was starting to take the bricks out of the walls that I built around myself to protect me from you, it, them, everything. And I became willing enough to go to the AA meetings that were offered in the minimum security part of the prison. Someone had come to visit me in prison, someone from AA in Florida. I had one friend, because she was as sick as I was, so we were kind of sick attracts sick. And she came to visit me and brought me all of your literature, and I kept it. I didn't throw it out. I shoved it under my bed. I pulled it out, and I started to go to the meetings, and I did the best that I could with what I had. Eventually, I became eligible for parole, and I was absolutely certain that I wouldn't be granted parole because, see, the glass isn't half empty. It's empty. It's dry with me. I'm cynical. And after 10 and a half weeks, I was granted parole via the Interstate Compact. It was a prisoner exchange with Florida, and I got to go to Florida to serve a 4.5-year parole. I was not allowed to move in with my mother because my mother lived in a senior community that did not allow convicted felons. So I got approval to live with my sister and her husband, the bum that dragged me to all the AA meetings. The morning I left, my brother showed up at the prison to pick me up and drop me off at Newark Airport. He gave me a pack of cigarettes, he gave me $30, an airline ticket, and I had nothing but a pair of gray sweatpants, a gray T-shirt, and a tan coat that said inmate on it when he dropped me off in front of the airport. And I remember getting out, and it was February 5th, and it was cold, and the wind chill was awful, and all I did was know that I had to get this jacket off my back. And I stood there in the bitter cold and shoved that jacket in a garbage can. And I walked inside, and I realized I don't know what to do here. It's been so many years since I've had an original thought, got to make a decision of my own. Security's changed. 9/11 happened when I was locked up. I don't even know how to check in for a flight or where to go. So I'm kind of following what people are doing, and I'm standing in line to go through the checkpoint, and these two little old ladies were in front of me. And they were complaining that they had to take their shoes off. Well, my security checkpoints have been a little more thorough up until this point, and I will be willing to show it all. I will bend over, I will spread them, I will lift them, I will cough and turn my head. Let me through. They didn't want all that. I didn't give them any of that. But I did get through. My sister picked me up, and I got to Florida, and I'm terrified. There's kids with sneakers that have wheels on them. There's cell phones that I don't know how to T9 something or other. I don't know how to turn on their TV. And part of my sentence was that once I was released from prison, I lost my license for 15 years on the day I was released. So now I'm a convicted felon living in Florida, which is not easy to live in Florida and find a job, period, especially if you're a convicted felon who doesn't drive. The only thing I knew I absolutely had to do was to get myself to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew it was non-negotiable. See, I'm not afraid to drink again and die. That would be okay. I'm afraid to drink again and live. So I know I must get to AA. So as God would have it, my sister drops me off in her little white minivan screaming, "Make good choices" at the AA meeting. And because she's so sweet. Did I tell you she served me my first meal on a orange tray with a spork? True story. True story. Anyway, so she drops me off at the AA meeting, and I go in, and as God would have it, when I opened the door, the person standing on the other side of that door was the woman who had come to see me in prison and brought me all of the AA literature. And God smiled on me. And I sat down, and I did everything I didn't want to do. I put up my hand and said, "My name is Rose, and I was just released from prison, and I need help." But I didn't want your help. See, I thought I was just supposed to sit in the room and things were going to magically get better. Drinking was always the problem, right? I'm not drinking now. So why am I still having all these problems? Now, I can't find a job because nobody's willing to hire me. And all I have to do is go to meeting after meeting after meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. You tell me to get a temporary sponsor, and I do that. I pick the easiest lady in the room, the one that would require the very least of me. And I sat in meetings, and I'm not getting any better. But I'm still grateful. Eventually, they tell me, "Well, you really should find a permanent sponsor." And I start looking around. And I'm afraid to ask. Because who's going to want to help a piece of garbage like me? Eventually, I got the courage up to ask this woman. And I think it was, everywhere I went, for weeks before I asked her, she would be there. If I went to Walmart, she was there. And she'd say, you meet the nicest people in Walmart. And I'm like, there she is again. If I went to Publix, there she was. No matter, it was like she was stalking me. So I eventually asked her. She was just the nicest lady. And I asked her, I said, would you consider being my sponsor? And she said, I was hoping you would ask. And she started my journey into recovery. I was not an easy person to deal with. They described me as a caged animal sitting in the corner. She would encourage me to share at meetings, and I refused. She would hit me, physically harm me in a meeting for not sharing. Say something! And she smacked me on the leg. And I said, nope. And I'm filing a report with the AA police because I thought it was abusive what she was doing to me. She was the kind of sponsor that's a great sponsor. She had like a 72 Cadillac, right? And she piles 17 girls into this 72 Cadillac, right? And you have the meeting before the meeting, you go to the meeting, and then you have the meeting after the meeting. And she would make these crass little comments to me like, well, had you said something, Rose, what exactly would you have said? Because you had a whole meeting to think about it. See, because at this point, I'm really not happy. I'm still kind of angry. I'm starting to lose my gratitude. And you can't convince me that there's nothing a man, a house, and a motorcycle won't fix. I really believe that. I believed all I needed to do was find the right guy that had the house and the Harley, and I'm good. And she saw that. And she made this wicked, horrible suggestion that I go to women's meetings. Let me tell you something right now. You've been locked up for 6 years and 3 days. You're not looking for a woman's meeting. And I told her that. So she said, you know what I want you to do? I want you to do a little something. I want you to make a list of everything that you're looking for in a man. Now, because I'm cynical, I can't say it in the positive. I have to do it in the negative. I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. So I make my list, perfectly scripted out, lovely paper, and I hand it to her, and she's just so good. Oh, that's a good one. That's great. Did you think about that? Oh, Rose. And then she asked me this question. And what exactly do you have to bring to this relationship? So here's the thing. When your sponsor tells you you have no business being in a relationship, they may know what they're talking about. I'm a big believer. See, had I gotten into that relationship, the man would have become my higher power. I never would have started my journey into recovery. Thank you. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for doing that for me and all the women who surrounded me and loved me. Then she made a suggestion. Here we go again with all these great suggestions. You're really angry. I'm not finding a job. Nobody will hire me. I'm cleaning 2 houses a week with somebody in the AA program. I'm working at their car wash. I'm making like $49 a week. She said, I think you should start working the steps. I've done 1. I think 2's good. I'll get on 3. I got my knees for 3. But see, I bought the lie about 4. Oh, I drank over the 4th step. Oh, that 4th step. I believed all the hype. I wish someone had said to me, do it, Rose. Because once you do this, you will now be free of all that things that keeps you in bondage, all those things that force you to drink again. I wish somebody had said it to me like that. This is your chance. And I wasn't afraid of telling you. I wasn't afraid of the 5th. I was afraid of really knowing who I was. See, I had bought the lie of who I wanted you to think I was. I was nice. I was polite. I was a good person. I was none of those things. So in doing my 4th step, it would reveal to me and I'd have to accept who I truly was, and that's what my fear was. And she said, well, keep it up, because 1 or 2 things are going to happen. You're either going to do it or you're going to drink again. The choice is yours. So she dragged me to lots of meetings, like I said, right? And I'm still not willing to do the work, and I'm a little pissy at this point. And I love speaker meetings, and I love speaker meetings for this reason. I knew for an hour I was safe. Nobody's calling on this girl. Because I got to the point where I would say, I'll just listen if they called on me. or I'll pass for tonight. So I was saying a little something, but not enough. So she takes me to the speaker meeting, her and like 36 other girls. She piled into her Cadillac, and we get there, and so I'm like, this is a speaker meeting, right? It was at a rehab or something. And she goes, it is. You know where we're going with this, don't you? So I said, ooh, good. And she said, I said, so who's speaking? She goes, you are. And that's what she did for me. And eventually the pain got great enough, and I made the decision to do the work. And I'm not somebody who believes you run through the steps one and done and you're done. I do them a lot. And I was talking to Beth on the way here, and I've done the steps many times. And my hardest, fourth step, fifth step, and amend steps are the ones that I've had to do with things that I've done stark raving sober, because I'm still the same person that I always was. I still have the same character defects. I like to say they do little costume changes and then make cameo appearances back, and there it is. And so I'm still the same girl. So I'm doing the work. Life's getting a little bit better. I have to ask for rides to meetings because, I don't drive. And my friend Kristen says, ask this lady for a ride. She's really good about giving rides. So I'm like, oh, God, talking to somebody, that requires effort. I'm not willing. So anyway, at the meeting, a lady slides a little piece of paper over to me, and she says, if you ever need a ride, call me. I'm like, sweet. I don't have to do the work, right? So she picks me up for the meeting next Monday, and she asked me on the way there, have you found a job? And I said, no, not having much luck. And she goes, I think this place is hiring. And I'm like, okay, great, whatever. Go to the meeting next Monday. She picks me up for the meeting again, and she goes, how's the job search going, Rose? I said, oh, not so good. Still haven't been able to find anything. She goes, I really think this place is hiring. I said, okay, great, super dupe. See you next week. So next week comes around, she picks me up. She says, how's the job search going, Rose? I said, not so good. She goes, I really think this place is hiring. I go, what is it? She goes, I own it. Would you just show up on Thursday? So my sponsor promised me that all my needs would be met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she has not lied to me yet. I started working for this woman. I worked for her. I started answering her phones, and then I managed her business for 7 years. 4.5 years ago, I got an opportunity which I thought would never be possible for somebody like me to work for a doctor. Amazing. I didn't think somebody like me would ever be allowed to work for a doctor because of my background. I can't even rent an apartment in the area I live because of my background. I have to go into individual owners of homes because they're the only ones who will give me a chance. Now I'm being groomed for office manager, the gifts of the program, right? So many. There's so many things when I came into AA they told me I'd never do. You'll never be able to travel while you're on parole. I've been everywhere while I was on parole. With the exception, my parole officer told me, please do not connect a flight through Canada. They may promptly arrest you. So I heeded that. I listened to him when he said that. But I've been everywhere. They told me you will never be able to take a meeting into a jail. I've done that. They told me you'd never vote again. I've done that. And nothing's come easy for me. I didn't come in and see the pink cloud, folks. Didn't happen that way. I don't even have a pink shirt. I do have a pink coat now. I purposely bought one. It's not been easy because I make it hard. My recovery's ebbs and flows. There's been moments I found myself on my knees saying, if this is all there is, I don't want it. And then I know I need to get plugged back into Alcoholics Anonymous. I know I need to go back to the beginning, back to the basics of the things that I know work for me. So I'm still looking for a man, right? Because that didn't go away. And I decide I'm not going to look anymore. I'm done. And a man found me. I met him in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And his first opinion of me was, what is her problem? And mine was, he's not bad to look at, but he's really angry. Romeo and Juliet, here we go again, right? Yes. I always think about something one of my favorite speakers, Mary G, says. She says, when boy meets girl on AA campus, right? It's so spiritual. It's really psychosis. And she's right. It's not been an easy relationship. We started our relationship 11 years ago. We've been engaged for 10 and a half years. Do not rush me. He's a good man. He's an Italian-American alcoholic Marine. Whoa. Right. Our first intimate moments were like here. Because neither one of us knew how to be in a proper relationship. I like to control and he likes to take hostages. So it's been a lot of work. But it's paid off because you apply the principles of the program, right? You apply all the stuff that we learn in here into our relationships and they become easier. Everything that I have in my life today that's good is because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the best thing I never wanted. It's allowed me to have relationships with people that I can't believe would even talk to me because of the harm that I've caused. It's allowed me to get up and to finally, after many years, be able to look myself in the mirror. And while I may not love what I see looking back at me, I don't hate her anymore. I've been afforded opportunities that I do not deserve. Had I gotten what I wanted, I'd be dead. Had I gotten what I deserved, I can't even imagine. The gifts of this program go on and on and on. I can't explain in any kind of words what this means to me. And the opportunity to come and share a little bit of who I am with you means even more. The only thing that ever kept my attention was when I heard somebody speak from their heart. Because it was so important to me at the beginning when I couldn't identify, I didn't know how. I had to lock into the fact that the person standing up there that looked so good and was comfortable, at one moment, felt like the piece of garbage I feel like right now. And to know that no journey is easy every day. It's not 55 every day. And to know I get to try over and over and start again. And to plug back in and go back to the basics. And the only way I've gotten to keep one little bit of the serenity that I've gotten is by sharing it in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I always read something in closing. It was something that was given to me in the puppy program that I was in prison. And it kind of sums up to me what AA means. It says, people are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten about tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best that you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it's between you and God. It was never about them anyway. I hope somehow today someone has managed to hear a little bit of my heart. Thank you for letting me share.